Where does Cubby come from?
My buddy's ex-fiance.
Uh-oh, let's get into it. Okay, what happened there? The fans are dying to know. Now, we heard fiance and we heard ex-fiance. So what's the deal? Break it down. So who cheated on who?
She died in a tragic car accident.
Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Millennial Smirk, and I'm bringing you the slop, the whole slop, and nothing but the slop. It's wild. It's wild. Look, personally, the whole tribalism stuff, I said it once and I'll say it again, I find it fun, especially when you watch people argue, right? It's fun. But I gotta tell you, on the real, some of the funnest stuff about the tribalism, whether it's from WWE, whether it's from AEW, is some of the most delusional fucking opinions that you could possibly hear, and it just shows the extremes in regards to the fandom in itself, and it points out why these people within the tribalism arguments, as fun as it is to watch them argue, why they should never be taken seriously, whether it's arguing on behalf of AEW and the extreme bullshit that they do, or arguing on behalf of WWE and the extremely boring shit that they do. You can never take these sides seriously because of the things that they say. Can I read you this real quick? And we're going to get a little bit more deep into this, but I want to read you this quote from this guy, right? I'll leave the link down in the description box below. I'll say his name. He's on a blue check mark, but you put yourself out there to be retarded. Let me expose you as the retard that you happen to be. This guy, WrestleGuru, said, "Y'all niggas sit through 5 years of a repetitive Bloodline story and wait for a payoff, but can't sit through a couple of months of the Death Riders for a payoff." That's wild to me. Now, obviously, he's referring to the ending of Dynasty, right? He's referring to the ending of the Dynasty show on Sunday with the Young Bucks interfering in the end of the match and the lights coming back on and them taking out Swerve Strickland for Jon Moxley to take the pinfall. And he's comparing this because he's saying that there's a payoff in the end. The payoff is obviously the comeuppance that's going to happen to the Dick Riders, right? And he's comparing that to the Bloodline. Now, obviously, most people with a brain, most people with common sense, most people who aren't insane tribalists would point out the obvious notion that the Bloodline storyline, for the most part, was captivating, right? You had your highs and your lows for the Bloodline storyline, but it started off very, very well, right? With Jay and Roman started off very, very, very well, and it continued for a few couple of months. Also, this is coming off the heels of Roman Reigns turning heel, which was also exciting, and then him being paired up with Paul Heyman, which was also exciting. And it was the build of the Bloodline and the presentation of the Bloodline that took place over the next few months. And you can argue that it got stale around mid-2021, around that time frame, right, going into 2022. But it built up enough charitability where people were curious as to where it was going to go as the story started to lead on, right? Not to mention the competitors, not to mention the actual subplots that took place that was leading up to the main plots. Eventually, you got people like Jimmy Uso, who trickled into all that, right? Obviously, eventually, you started to include Sami Zayn, who added more fire, more gasoline, if you will, to the heat, right? And then you trickled in Solo Sikoa. And this is peak because now you have certain people with subplots within the Bloodline, not subplots in regards to the Bloodline and other people, no, subplots within the Bloodline, while they have subplots with other people, while they have a main arc being Roman Reigns as the tribal chief. All this stuff builds up to a crescendo, which is the height of the Bloodline angle, which was War Games in 2022. And that path between War Games of 2022 all the way to WrestleMania 39, where it legitimately peaked, that was the charitability that people were waiting on. or people granted because they were waiting on the conclusion of all of that. Right? You understand? Then Cody Rhodes gets introduced into all of this. So now there's another subplot. You do understand that you're comparing a to be continued. Right? This is what you're comparing. You're comparing a to be continued that people are interested in to the Bloodline. That's a Bloodline story. You're comparing all that to Jon Moxley and the Dick Riders, who couldn't even get episode 1, who couldn't even get the pilot episode correct. You do understand that there's a difference, right? Right? You do understand there's a difference. Like, can you understand the point that the Dick Riders have never done anything compelling? The reason why we gave charitability to, admittedly at times, a repetitive Bloodline story was because they had peaks and valleys at one point, and there are still incomplete things happening within the story that we can see on the horizon, that we're willing to wait to see what's going to happen while we're making our way towards that goal while being on that journey. You do not have that in the Dick Riders angle. There is no peaks, there is no valleys, there's no plateau, there's not even a fucking foundation. The amount, it is wild to me why that needs an explanation. It is wild to me, and it just kind of screams. It screams everything that I've been confirming. It's funny how now I see everybody who now understand that point, even the most hardest objective diehard AEW fans are now starting to come around and recognize that, yeah, you know what? This is very, very bad. And maybe if you guys would have put more time and effort into more of, cultivating and fleshing out the story rather than consistently focusing on your dumbass in-ring action, then maybe, just maybe, you probably could do something compelling. You probably could. But you didn't. And you don't know how to. But it gets better. Can I read this article for you guys? Now, to be fair, it's not as if Tony hasn't said this already during the whole entire press conference on Sunday last week. But I feel like people who are also coping with this are trying to suggest that Tony knows what he's doing, and in the end of the day, he's going to pivot from this before we get to All In, right? Because people think that the Dick Rider story right now is on thin ice, and it could break at any time, at any walk pattern. It could break. You could fall right through the fucking ice. And they think that Tony Khan is legitimately going to pivot from this. Can I read this article from you guys, if you don't mind, and give you kind of the scope of where Tony Khan's head is lying in right now? Khan notably said, link is on the description box below. Khan notably said that he has considered pivoting, keep that in mind, based on fan reaction to the stories, and admitted noticing how popular Strickland, Swerve that is, was with the fans and the reaction to the Bucks' return. And I quote, "On a night where a lot of fan favorite moments, that was not obviously what a lot of fans were hoping for," Tony Khan said. "I do think Jon Moxley has been, from the very beginning of AEW, one of the most important figures from the very first pay-per-view we did. And it's very interesting now. This creates a lot of intrigue to have the Young Bucks back." Keep that in mind. He thinks that this is creating a lot of intrigue to have the Young Bucks back. The AEW president then explained how important the Bucks are to the promotion, adding that this ultimately creates an intriguing situation considering their alliance with Moxley, and how the move will bring even more people behind Strickland. "I think the fans love Swerve," says Tony. "I don't think the Young Bucks or their involvement screwing him changes that. I do think for tonight it creates a very intriguing situation," Khan added. Tony Khan continued to emphasize how important Swerve Strickland is for AEW, and noting just how popular the former AEW World Champion has become, but pointed out how major Jon Moxley also is to AEW. And I quote, "Jon Moxley has done a lot of great things for the company, Jon Moxley, you can argue, has recently, not just in his history, recently done great things for the company." Let me say that part one more time for the people in the back. Jon Moxley, you can argue, has recently, not just in his history, recently done great things for this company. Khan argued, I was recently very impressed with not only the match, not only the barbaric street fight that John had with Adam Copeland, and to get back in the ring so soon after that for the mixed tag match, and then again, that is enough to put someone out permanently. Certainly, I think there was a lot of support for Swerve tonight, but it's certainly going to create an intriguing situation with the Young Bucks, who are our greatest stars ever, coming back and wreaking havoc. Oh boy, notably AEW Dynasty was the first time the Young Bucks were seen on television since they hurried away from Jon Moxley and the Death Riders first took over the promotion. About a month ago, reports predicted that their imminent arrival after several backstage sightings, which might point to their ongoing involvement in the storyline behind the scenes. So, just to put that into context also, I heard about that also, that there's a good shot that the Dick Rider storyline was also helped to be terrible by the Young Bucks. So they have involvement within the storyline. So they're also behind the scenes moving pieces around and propping the story as far as being something that's worth watching on television. This is the difference, to further that point, between the Bloodline story and the Dick Rider story. The Bloodline story, in regards to the involvement, were legitimate professionals. People who have main evented WrestleMania. People who, in the grand scheme of things, like them or hate them, drew money. The involvement of the Bloodline angle were people like Roman Reigns, were people like Triple H, were people like Paul Heyman. These are the people that are involved within the Bloodline angle. You can hate them as much as you want on an individual level, on a subjective level. 3 of these people probably drew WWE at this point of time billions of dollars. If you take everything and add it all up and together, their input, those 3 people along, have probably brought WWE billions of dollars. Billions. Your input for the Dick Riders angle that we are aware of so far are Tony Khan, Jon Moxley, and the Young Bucks. Anybody wants to tell me which angle from a, mind perspective has more of the business sided, just call me crazy, the business sided minded way of looking at things that, one happens to be on the forefront versus a bunch of marks who just want to get their jollies off in a wrestling company. You tell me which one you feel fits whichever criteria in regards to whatever superstars who are, cultivating said story that belongs to them and their company. I think, the Roman Reigns and the Paul Heymans and the Triple H's of the world, I think those guys, I think you can link the $1 billion, company to the guys who care more about the story. I think they're more linked up to that. The business-sided minded way of thinking and looking more at where the story is going and going with that. And it's not to say that they're perfect. It's not. Like I said, the WrestleMania build this year is ass cheeks to me. I don't like it at all. It's kind of boring. Actually, it's very boring. But at the same time, that's just me. I can't speak for everybody else. Apparently, there's a lot of people who like it outside of the IWC, outside of me. Right? Not to mention, as far as I'm concerned, I've seen way more big moments, and again, I'm way more charitable to WWE to see where they're going, even if we're 2 weeks out towards WrestleMania, because of things like the Bloodline angle, the initial one with Roman and the Usos and Sammy and Solo and Paul, the initial Bloodline story. It's things like that actually make me say to myself, you know what, I'm still willing to wait it out. If for nothing else, I know that they might deliver head over heels at WrestleMania, and it's going to be an exciting story, and it's going to be an exciting moment pushing forward. The problem with WWE sometimes is how they get to the story can be boring sometimes. But I know down that path, you're going to get 3, 4, 5 great moments. It's going to be probably 20 missed, but you're going to get some 3, 4, 5 great moments. And I know the conclusion is going to be very, very good. Most recently. Whereas with AEW, the road to it sucks. The conclusion sucks. And they typically try to pay it off with how good the match is going to be. Not how great the moment is, something that's going to actually last a lot longer than the match in itself, but how good the match is. Not to mention their path of getting to that point is having match after match after match to get to that point. There is no prioritizing the story. There is no prioritizing the characters. You can't even prioritize the title, the main goal. You can't even do that. You mix and match the importance of what significance is brought to your company based off of the stories that you're preparing for your big shows. And when you devalue so many superstars, when you devalue your championships, of course the story, obviously is going to take a hit. And when you do that, and now you try to introduce a new story with all these elements that are being introduced that are garbage, being the superstar, the value of the title, everything that's involved within that. And then you think that you're considering going forward with doing more garbageness to promote the garbage that you've already established as garbage. Do you understand where I'm coming from when I say this? Do you see my perspective when I see people even attempt to try to compare the Bloodline angle to the Dick Riders? No. One has earned, if for nothing else, the decades of me watching professional wrestling, put that to the side alone. One company has earned the right, has earned the respect, even how bad they happen to be right now, and it is, don't make no mistakes about it, WrestleMania, the build to it is it's terrible. It is fucking terrible. I hate this build of WrestleMania this year. But they've earned my charitability. They've earned my respect to see where they're going with this. Because I know it's not going to be paid off with trivialistic nonsense that's only going to last for that specific moment. Whereas the other company has A, not earned it, B, not even shown that they're even worthy of wanting to earn it. And C, honestly, just take me out of the equation. I don't think they even care to want to earn it. They don't care. When you have Tony Khan actively telling you that what he's currently doing at the moment is a good thing, what he's actively telling you that Jon Moxley and the Young Bucks and all this stuff is good and we should be going forward with it. After seeing the reaction you've been having for the past couple of months, not just from the fans, not just from the IWC, but the ratings in itself suggesting otherwise. Why don't you ever put Jon Moxley and his world title reign? Why don't you ever, rarely if ever, put him in the main event? Huh? Because if they were good, they'd be able to carry the show, and people they can't wait. They need to see the ending of the show to see where this. But you can't do that because putting Jon Moxley as world champion in the main event, it's not going to make a difference whether it's him in the main event or Julia Hart in the main event. Makes no difference. But with the Bloodline, it absolutely made a difference. You put them in the beginning of the show, and I know they're going to be in the end of the show. I need to see what's the ending. That's the difference. That's the big difference. Tony Khan and AEW, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. And of course, we got later on tonight AEW Dynamite. That's going to be on the air. Going to see what they're going to do. Continuing with the Young Bucks and the Jon Moxley Death Rider bullshit angle. If they even want to hit on it tonight. They do that all the time also. Where they give you a story and then they don't even go directly into it. Not even an inkling of it. We'll see where they're going to go with it tonight. And if for anything else, it's low-cal material for my channel. But to sit here and have the audacity to compare the Bloodline to Jon Moxley, That's some massive copium, and you're just fooling yourself, and you have to tell yourself anything, and I'm talking about the AEW fans, that is, to justify the decisions that AEW does. No, the Bloodline angle in its 5 years of, waiting for that and not doing it for Jon Moxley. I was waiting, and I'm willing to go through the Bloodline angle for 5 years because of what they have been doing for the past 5 years. I can't make it with Jon Moxley past 5 months, let alone you want me to wait the next day after 5 months of this bullshit. Get real and stop being delusional and put down the crack pipe. But as always, my name is Devontae, aka Millennial Smirk, and I'd like to hear some of your comments down in the comment section below. I'll be catching you guys later. Deuces and a P. Ice.